We are the ones who create this new world, and it's only going to change when we harness all of these forces that make up the wholeness that we are. Right now, other countries in our world are fighting each other. Why does that happen? It happens because we have leaders who don't realize who they are. When you come to know you are not only a human playing a role, but also a soul, a direct expression of higher consciousness, you can no longer do harm to others. You no longer want to take over other people's belongings. You see that everything we have belongs to each other. Just understand that hurt people, and that people who are blinded to our true nature act in accordance with only the worst parts of human nature. But happily, human nature also includes, as you know and as we see in this world, compassion and kindness, and that comes from being in harmony with our true nature, which is wholeness. So in this model, we're going to be talking about appeasing the left brain, because the left brain side of us is that logical, rational thinking side. If we only pay attention to that side of our human nature, we miss out on the intuitive, flowing, more sensitive and empathic side that goes along with the right brain. So we don't want to eschew, push down, disdain the left brain. It plays a very valuable role for us here in our human experiences. But the whole goal is balance and harmony. So the left brain is the side of us that needs evidence, that needs proof that there is a greater reality. I've shared some stories with you of my connections with higher consciousness in previous modules. I'm going to share with you now a way we can appease the left side, appeal to our nature to need evidence, to need proof, and to show you that the connections you make when you use the practices you're learning here, such as the Bless Me method and the Sip of the Divine, that the connections you make when you connect with other beings at other levels of consciousness are not just your imagination. First of all, what is imagination? Imaging, coming up with ideas and thoughts. Einstein truly valued imagination. It was his journeys of consciousness and using imagination to take him to new levels of thought. His quote is one of my favorites, that no challenge is ever solved at the same level at which it originated. That shows that he understood there are different levels of awareness. We are part of every level. You are a multisensory being with multidimensional nature. Let's harness that. Don't let your left brain, what we call the logical side, use reasoning and only this objective world to think this is all that is. You're truly limiting yourself and not allowing your soul's nature to come through and help you feel that connectedness and access higher wisdom. So how do you know that the information you're perceiving is not just something that you're creating through deliberately imaging or imagining certain scenarios? First of all, the connection that you make to receive answers, and sometimes answers that just come to you, will have a freshness. And most of the time they come in response to a clear intention that you set. I really would love if you come to know how very powerful your intention is. It's the creative force that you harness as a soul in a body, using your free will to use that intention deliberately for the greater good, not just for you, but for all of us as one interconnected web. So with the clear intention to receive guidance from higher consciousness, you now, with attention, begin focusing, paying attention, noticing snags, listening and watching for what comes up in your full senses. So, what arises in response to a direct intention to be more connected, to get higher guidance from the higher levels that will help the greater good, you notice fresh, new insights. Imagination is sitting down deliberately with a sense of trying. Fresh insights come in with no effort whatsoever. There's a very big difference between thinking and imagining and just receiving. You can actually feel it in your body. Let me show you the difference. Just sitting there right now, I'd like you to notice how your head and your brain feel. Now I would like you to multiply 13 times 26.5. I'm grinning a little bit because I couldn't do it in my head very easily, but let's make it a little easier. 13 times 17. Now, as you do that, notice, does your brow furrow a little? Do you feel a little tightness in your head? You may even notice you've stopped breathing while you're trying to do that math problem. Why? Because we generally stop breathing when we're thinking hard. So, imagination, when you're actively imagining something, has a bit of a thinking, a bit of that tense quality to it. Now I want to ask you another question. Do you exist? And what's the answer? Of course, the answer is yes. How do you know? Well, the answer is you just know. Did you have to think about that? No. You just know. It's right here. Do you feel how free that feels? No tension in the head, in the brow at all. So when with intention you ask a specific question of higher guidance, or you make of higher guides, or you make a connection with a loved one who has passed, or a guide, or one of the masters, or higher consciousness itself, notice how that feels and listen and look for what's new. There will always be a quality of, I know I didn't come up with that myself. It will always be helpful and healing. If it comes with fear, there's a little bit of the personal ego mixed up in that. Ego, in this case, having nothing to do with pride, but with fear, right? So you're present and you listen. It's new and it's fresh, and it answers a question. It's in response to an intuition. It's helpful and healing. Now what happens is you put to use what you heard. You act on the guidance. You make decisions based on what you received, what you saw, what you heard, and you notice the results. Was that helpful? Did that propel you forward? Did it help your path? If so, you know that that subtle feeling that may have come with that insight can be trusted. You probably know this as listening to your intuition and acting on it. It's the same thing, but it takes practice. When you're pretty sure that this is coming from yourself, there's a bit of a clenching in the gut and the heart area. There's a tightness, there's a fear. That's personal stuff. That's more related to imagination. You act on that and you hit a wall, or things don't go the way you had expected they would. That was probably your imagination. But I'm going to teach you now a method that you can use to test that you are actually engaging and experiencing the presence of another field of consciousness at a higher level beyond the physical body. And it's what I call the sign game. Those in higher consciousness do not mind being put to the test. They want you to know, I'm here, we're here to help you. So what you do is, when you sense a presence and engage with it, and you've asked a guide or your loved one across the veil, anybody on your cosmic team, for some guidance or answers that are helpful to the greatest good possible, you receive the answer, maybe you write it down, then you say, if I am to trust that this wasn't my imagination, I would like a sign in the coming week, sooner rather than later, of this. You're going to ask then for a very specific sign. Whatever pops into your mind, ask for it. When I said I would like a sign of this, you feel that little pause? Right there, something will come to mind. Ask for that. Why? Because your guides and loved ones, your cosmic team, knows you're playing the sign game. If it's really them and not your imagination, they will bend over backwards to help you encounter whatever it is that they put in your mind in that brief pause. You at first will think you came up with that sign to ask for when you paused. But as I've said before, we are part of one undivided wholeness. The higher beings know what's in your path in the coming week. They know what you're going to encounter, and they will put that in your mind. It will sound exactly like what? Like your imagination. But trust it and say, all right, I'll notice it when I see it. You don't have to go around deliberately looking for it, because your guides will snag you big time when it's in your field. Perfect example of this was when I was first playing the sign game. I had a conversation with my main spirit guide, and I said, if I can trust what you just told me, I would like a sign in the next few days of, you see that pause? A silver medallion. Now, where did that thought come from? I may have at the time thought I made it up. I know now from having played the sign game for a decade, my guide put it there knowing what would happen. And what happened is the very next day I was traveling. I was flying on Delta Airlines. I sat down in my seat, sitting there for an hour or so, and I got a little restless after reading a book. So I pulled out the airline magazine that was in the seat back in front of me. I rarely look at those magazines, but I started just leafing through the pages, and suddenly my eyes rested on an ad for Delta Airlines, and I laughed out loud. It said something like, if you rack up enough frequent flyer miles with us, you will earn silver medallion status. Now see, I may have thought that I was going to find an actual coin, a silver medallion. In the sign game, it doesn't matter. When you get your sign, you'll know it, and the spirit world doesn't care what form it comes. But they knew I was going to be flying the next day. That's the higher perspective of the higher realms, and put the thought in my head. And I always love to picture those in the higher realms going like, oh, this is going to be good when they notice this sign, because they know we will if we're meant to see it. If you don't get your sign, you may have missed it, or truly you haven't yet learned to discern that subtle difference of new, fresh information versus same old thoughts that come up in your human consciousness. Make sure that when you ask for a sign, that it's something reasonable. If it's not, it is coming from your imagination and not from your guides. I had somebody ask for a sign. They wanted a picture to fall off a wall. Those in the spirit world know that takes an awful lot of energy to do that. So make it something that is likely you'll encounter it. I once was coaching someone about how to play the sign game, and I said, make sure it's something realistic. For example, you wouldn't want to ask for a pink elephant. Well, the joke was on me, because the very next day my husband and I were out for a bike ride on a trail that we'd never ridden on, and it went along a highway. And as we're riding along, I looked to the right just as we passed a car dealership I'd never seen before, and I kid you not, out in front of that car dealership was a full-size pink elephant. So I could again just hear my guides laughing. But really make it something reasonable. Just before recording this module, I was checking a post on Facebook, on my Facebook page, and one of my students in a current class I'm teaching on mediumship said that she had played the sign game, and she asked for a pink elephant, having heard this story. She said she lives in South Africa, where they don't have elephants at all, so she thought, I wonder how this is going to manifest. She went to a coffee shop, sat down, was just taking a sip of coffee, and looked up, and there on the shelf was a hand-crocheted little pink elephant. So I hope that you can see that connecting with the cosmic forces doesn't have to be all serious. That would be your left brain. We're coming up ways to appease the left brain by asking for evidence, but that doesn't mean you can't have a little fun and totally enjoy like a little kid when you get your signs. Now, I have a friend named Brenda Baker who passed to the other side in 2018. She came through to me immediately after passing as a soul, connecting soul to soul with me from the higher realms. And we connect all the time now. In fact, she's my guide when I do sessions for people. Never saw it coming, but there's no mistaking that she's here. I feel her, I hear her, and she helps me out a lot. One of the ways she helps me is by playing what I call the sign game before I do my sessions. In this case, she and I have a mutual friend who is my dear friend and my assistant, Lynette. As I sit down to do a session, just to make sure I'm tuned in and connected, and you can do this yourself, ask a loved one in spirit, tell me something going on in someone else's life that we both know that I don't know about. So that's what I ask Brenda every time I sit down to do a session. Hey Brenda, just like that, that's simple. Hey Brenda, what's Lynette up to today? And just for example, yesterday as I sat to do a session, Brenda showed me Lynette with clothespins, and I knew it had something to do with doing laundry. I texted Lynette very quickly, said, I'm getting ready to do a session. This is what Brenda showed me. That's the sign. And Lynette at the time didn't know what it meant. She said, I do have some laundry to do. Well, this morning she texted me again, Suzanne, I completely missed it. I had washed out some socks yesterday, but she's visiting a friend. She didn't have a way to hang up the socks like clothespins, so she just draped them over a couple of cups. This was clearly Brenda showing us that Lynette needed clothespins for her fresh laundry. This is how very real this web of connections is. The most stunning example of the web regarding the sign game, which I hope I'm encouraging you to play so that you'll know your place in the cosmos is not limited to this physical body, is the time I sat to do a session. I tuned into Brenda to say, what is Lynette doing? And I couldn't sense Brenda. Very unusual. I checked again, and there she was. I could feel her, and she said, sorry, I was helping our friend Jane. Now, Jane's still here in human form, and I said silently, what do you mean? This is a soul-to-soul connection. You can engage higher consciousness like this anytime. She said, Jane's going through a rough time. Tell Lynette. So I shared that with Lynette in a text, and I went and I did my session. When the session was over, I reconnected with Lynette. I said, did you find out what's going on with Jane? Lynette had contacted our friend Jane, and it turns out, yes, she was going through a hard time, but it's better than that. Remember the web. Turns out Jane is aware of this sign game I play with Brenda and Lynette all the time. She knows Brenda is still very much here as a field of consciousness, just like you are and I am. And Jane said, by shifting channels to the spirit world, Brenda, I'm going through a rough time. I'd really like your support. And so that I really trust that you hear me, I'd like you to use this conversation in that game you play with Suzanne and Lynette. Do you get it? She had Brenda tell me that so I'd tell Lynette, who closed the loop with Jane. It worked exactly as she intended it. There is no other explanation for this kind of connection than that all of us are part of a web, and it's not a physical web, it is one of consciousness, because we are part of one whole. The more all of us come to know this and tap into the web for guidance, getting our logical left brains out of the way, but appeasing them by asking for evidence and playing things like the sign game, you will learn to trust this. You'll learn to trust it's not just your imagination when you receive guidance. Then you'll act on it, and you'll notice your life is starting to flow. And you're getting guidance that helps not just you, but those around you. The more all of us start coming from this place of connection, the more we will be a positive influence in our world with ripples that spread worldwide. That's what this masterclass is all about, harnessing these cosmic forces to help change our world. Thank you so much for your efforts in doing that.
If you'd like to see more, click the link below and you'll gain access to hundreds of transformational education programs on the Humanitysteam Plus platform.